I think what people really would like to know here is what is the job market looking like? And how are the placements going? You want to take that?
Okay, so the job market is a little tough everywhere. I'm sure that most of you would have read the report that 23% of the Harvard graduates are still not employed, which is after 6 months. So we're not just talking about the job market in India, but we're talking about the job market in the world. The good news is that India is still doing very, very strong, both in terms of economic development, both in terms of infrastructure investment, and therefore if we continue onto the path of the current policies and strengthen, particularly investment in the infrastructure, I think we will do fine. It's tough, but fine.
But there is a decline in the placements in India as well, right?
There's a decline for certain kinds of jobs. So I think that could be one of the core things when I read this topic that you chose for the two of us. The core thing is that today India Inc., the industry, is looking at skills rather than degrees. So merely having a degree, like I'm sure that you're talking about some of the IT graduates not getting the kind of jobs that they're accustomed to. It's simply because the kind of skills that the Indian industry is looking for, the industry world over for that matter, is currently not a part of the educational system in some of the institutions, including some of the top institutions.
Himanshu is absolutely right on this. I think I've had numerous conversations with corporate recruiters, in India. And one of the main themes that seems to keep recurring in these conversations is the large gap between what people graduate from various programs, engineering or management programs, in terms of the functional knowledge that they have. I think that's fine. But what is really missing is the other skills, like critical reasoning, problem solving. Those kinds of skills are seemingly lacking, and to me that is also an artifact of the way the education system has evolved. And I was just struck by what Governor Arif Mohammed Khan said. The values that we have and the way we think, somewhere that seems to be dissipating because we teach to exams. We don't encourage people to think outside the box, to accommodate diversity of views and so on and so forth. And so, to me, what has happened is that we are moving in a very blinkered way in terms of how we think about things, and our students are therefore, in a way, they are kind of finding themselves challenged to cope with the changes that are happening in the marketplace today. Today, anyone who graduates is expected to fit in from day one and start working and take on the roles. There is very little time to basically experiment, to train and all of that. The cost of experimentation is extremely high. And therefore, I think that's really why we are seeing these skill gaps emerging. And with the advent of AI and everything, I think that's going to, open another Pandora's box in terms of, what kind of skills are we actually imparting in our various institutions.
So we've had the NEP in place now for 4 years. What really has changed then? Because the NEP was meant to address all these challenges. This is not, it hasn't crept up on everyone. We knew that this was coming. So what really has changed on the ground? By now, most institutions should have adapted to the changes.
So there are two elements here, Kaveri.
Yeah.
One is everyone adopting it? For example, when Annamalai was talking, and when he's talking about this particular state, he said the state government has not adopted it. And therefore, across states, there is a discontinuity. But if you look at the national institutions, they are adopting it. The only thing is that for the results to actually get translated, and things to get translated into results is going to take time. I'll give you a specific example of us. So at IIM Indore, when I took charge 6 years back, I was aghast to know that despite the fact that Indore had both an IIM and an IIT, we were not doing anything together. And the reason when I tried to dig out was we were still trying to figure out which director, which go to whom. And I said, hang on, I called up the director of IIT. I said, where are you? He said, I'm here. I said, just stay there. I'm coming over. We met, and today we have a joint Masters of Science in Data Science and Management, a joint degree with IIT and IIM. Now that's a direct result of the NEP, which talks about multidisciplinarity.
Yes.
We also have subjects. So, Governor Arif Mohammad Khan spoke about the concept of ethics, the concept of having a moral compass. We have an undergraduate program which sits on 4 pillars. One is the foundations of management. The second is principles of politics, philosophy, and economics. The third is statistics and maths. And the fourth is drama, theater, sports, yoga. So here we have a holistic degree because we are actually looking at education that NEP talks about. Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. We keep saying that. But when it actually comes to talking, in the minds of the people, sa vidya ya niyuktaye. Niyukti mil jaye mere ko vidya se. Now that is being changed when you adopt the NEP 2020. I'm not saying that employability or employment is not necessary, but employment is going to be a byproduct if you have the right skills that Suresh was talking about. So I think we are getting there. The only thing is we just have to make sure that the NEP is implemented in its true spirit and not merely checking some of the boxes, which is what unfortunately Kaveri currently is happening in some places.
Yeah, I completely endorse that. I think what IIM Indore is doing, and the kind of a multidisciplinary approach to education, that is the need of the hour. That we really need to think about how our students are thinking about things from multiple angles. I'll give you some examples from my own experience. When I spent about 22 years in the US before coming back.
Where?
I was at the University of Chicago and then at Texas A&M, so I was on the faculty there. But one of the things that always struck me, Kaveri, was the fact that, when you are in the classroom and you meet a very, very diverse set of people in the classroom with very different perspectives. I've interacted with a baseball player, in the classroom. I've interacted with a kind of a vocal, interacted with a composer or an orchestra, symphony orchestra composer, right? I mean, I've interacted with all kinds of people. The point I'm trying, and this is exactly what I think Himanshu was touching upon, the idea that we celebrate diversity in thought and we basically get our students to kind of embrace the idea that there are many, many different ways to look at things. Today, the MBA classroom is probably about 70% engineers.
And 80% male?
Yeah, that's also true, right? And I tell them honestly, right? You are a potato in a sack of potatoes. What differentiates you from the other?
Right.
What's so special about you, right? And unfortunately, the metrics on which we admit students are based on simply numerical checkbox. And so to what Himanshu was saying, we are basically checking boxes, and that approach is not going to do well for us in the long run. We need people who can think out of the box. We need people who have creativity. And I'm very encouraged by the intent of the NEP, and I would certainly hope that it is implemented in full measure. There is another angle of the NEP, which is research, which also needs to flourish in India. And today there is, there are lots of challenges to this. We are seeing other countries go way ahead of us on research, and we are still playing catch up. And the infrastructure, the way that we are facilitating research, there is still a lot that needs to be done.
I'm sorry, but this is a conversation that even if we'd had 4 years ago, you guys would have said the same thing and I would have probably asked the same question. So what has really changed? And our students have, right? Our kids have. So are we not failing them by not addressing their needs, their requirements, their worldview? The last 4 years have also seen a post-COVID fallout. We've had kids with enormous mental health issues as well. So why have we not done anything about it? I mean, how much will we talk about it? We have to start doing something. So are we changing the way we're teaching at least? You can do the same thing but in a different way as well, and address some of the issues that the kids face. The enormous pressure that they're under. 2 years where they were not really socializing with one another. So you're actually looking at very basic issues which schools possibly should have addressed when you talk about ethics and moral values. Why do they have to come to you at 21 or 23 and you have to address these issues, right? There is something clearly very wrong. And this is also a post-COVID generation, a very different generation. What is your understanding of this?
So there are two parts to your question, Kaveri. One is about what did we do in terms of when COVID was happening and the mental pressure, etc., etc. And second, why do we need to teach the students now when it should have been done in schools? I'll give you a very quick example. So when the lockdown happened, we were the first IIM to send our students home, and we were the first IIM to turn to online education. There was a very humbling experience for me. Within a week, we went online and we patted ourselves on our backs saying, wow, great work done. It was only 2-3 weeks later, we realized that we were looking at it only from our viewpoint.
Right.
There were some of my students who were in such far-flung areas that they did not have even 2G.
Have connectivity.
Forget the connectivity.
Yeah.
Some of them did not have a room to themselves because the entire family was sharing the rooms. There are some people who did not have separate laptops because everyone was working on the laptops.
Absolutely.
And therefore we realized we have to change the way we educate them. So we started making modules on WhatsApp and sending it to them. The point I'm trying to make is that at some point of time, educational institutions have made this cardinal error, I will not call it sin, of overlooking the other side. And that is something we immediately corrected ourselves. So the humility, etc., the alternative viewpoint that Vikram was talking about, there has to be a way of looking at things from multiple perspectives. I mean, we keep saying Vidya Dadati Vinayam, but we seldom practice what we preach. Thankfully, at least some of us educational institutions are now trying to practice that. And to the second part, no point blaming the school system because it's there. And I'm sure what we can do is we can help the schools. So at IIM Indore, we work with the schools to make sure that we are strengthening the curriculum. Earlier, we used to have faculty development programs only for management institutions. Now we have it for school teachers, school principals. During COVID, we reached out to 2.5 lakh school teachers in Madhya Pradesh, once again through WhatsApp modules. And therefore, we train them in certain things. To the other part, as to how do we inculcate, say, some of the skills like empathy, what we do is we have something called experiential learning. So all my students go for something called Himalayan Outbound Program, where they go to the Himalayas, and by trekking in the villages of the Himalayas, not only do they learn teamwork and leadership, but they also understand the challenges. I don't know how many people in this audience know that the Himalayas are called the third pole. Do you know this, that 2/3 of the fresh water in the Indian subcontinent comes from the glaciers in the Himalayas? So after the North Pole and South Pole, Himalayas are the biggest repository of fresh water. Now, it's one thing if you see, let's say, a plastic bag here. If you see a plastic bottle in this room, you will say, well, it shouldn't have been here. But it's another thing when you see a plastic bottle in a Himalayan glacier, you feel physically repulsed. And that's when my students go and see that, they understand the challenges. The second thing, all my students have to necessarily go and live in the villages of India for 1 week. Now, earlier it was called Rural Immersion Program, where they would talk to villagers and then try and understand their problems and then try to offer solutions. But I said this is not good. Rural Immersion Program is not good for 2 reasons. One, I did not like the acronym RIP, so I said RIP to RIP.
That's terrible.
The second, I think, it's one thing to get to know from a villager that he or she has to walk 1 kilometer to fetch potable water, and it's another thing to actually walk that 1 kilometer
in their shoes
for at least those 5 or 6 days and then understand that. So now they are doing all of it. And once again, to all my young audience over here, I mean, I'm not excluding the not so young audience, but to everyone, 900 million people live in the villages of India. 900 million. That's more than the population of United States and the Europe combined. And unless we address the challenges that they face, we cannot develop as a country. So the least I'm expecting, which is happening from this experiential learning, is that they're developing empathy, sensitivity. If not, I don't expect all of them to go and start working in the villages, but even if some of them start becoming more sensitive, I think our job is done.
But Suresh, I wanted you to address a different point related to this. They may be empathetic, but they're entering a very brutal corporate world. And the more you hear about 90-hour work weeks and, actual deaths occurring from overwork, it is a cutthroat business, right? And, while they may do this course for credits, and I'm sure they get good credits if they do it well, they know the reality that there are too many of them and there are too few jobs. And we are not able to address the too few jobs. So how do you,
No, I think it's
fix this gap?
No, that's a very, very important question to address, right? I think the fact that when students go out into the real world, they're going to be confronted with a reality which is very stark, very competitive. At the same time, I don't think, and I completely endorse what Himanshu is doing, and I can also share, exactly what we have been doing at Great Lakes. The value of empathy, the value of understanding others' perspectives, the value of putting yourself into the shoes of the other, I don't think that would ever get, minimized, even in a cutthroat world, right? So,
But what do you do if your bosses have not learned empathy? They didn't go to the right schools or colleges.
Well, yeah, see, there is an aspect of competence, and then there is an aspect of, empathy or soft skills. You talk to any recruiter today, what they will tell you is, what is missing in students today is soft skills, right? The competitiveness, the edginess, I think that is innate to us in India. I think we have all competed against the best of the best in terms of exams and competitive exams. So I think competitiveness comes naturally to us.
And also all of them have probably taken lots of classes to get through the
when I went to IIT Delhi and then IIM Calcutta, then at that time, there was an ad that I saw, you are twice filtered.
Right. And then, of course, a lot of them take the IAS exam. So, the UPSC exam. So I don't know, is that the best use of our resources?
Yeah, that's a separate issue. But the point I'm trying to make is the competitiveness side of things. I think that part of it, your ability to deal with the brutality of the workplace, I think people will adapt. Having said that, I think today's generation is probably a little more sensitive to it. Growing up, I think we were much more comfortable with it. Today, I think, in the post-COVID era, as you rightly pointed out, there are mental stresses that they go through, which we should
And they're very happy to vocalize it. Unlike our generation, which was so grateful for jobs, this generation is very happy to tell you where to get off.
So I think at any institution, obviously, we want to prepare people for the realities of the workplace. And so at Great Lakes, for example, we have a faculty mentoring program for the students. So every 15 days, our faculty are meeting with 10 or 12 of the students one-on-one and talking to them about, what are their concerns, what they're going through, and so on. So we are trying to, basically address any problems that might crop up.
Do you have psychologists on campus?
We do, yeah. So we have counseling help.
How many?
We have a team of psychologists who work with them online. But if there is any special intervention that is required, then we can do that. So
So what is it that you're finding in the last 6 years you've been here at IIM Indore? Have you seen a change in the kind of person who's coming to you, the kind of future corporate boss who's coming to you?
So If you're talking about changes that I find in students, one, of course, is the class is more diverse. Like you pointed out, when I went to IIM Ahmedabad, we were 90% male engineers in the classroom. And you're absolutely right.
I wonder, in terms of caste, what it must have been like.
We didn't know each other's caste, to be frank. That is something that students normally at least don't discuss. And it has never become an issue of contention so far as we were concerned. But I still remember in 2010, when as the CAT convener, I introduced something called the diversity factor. I was hammered on the social media. People said he's anti-engineer, anti-male. And then somebody said, well, he's a male. And then they dug a little deeper and they said he's also an engineer. So clearly he must have thought something. And then I had to tell them, when you talk about who's the best person that you select, it's not about cracking an exam. It is about what do we teach at IIMs or at Great Lakes? We teach people to make better, responsible decisions. Now, what kind of responsible decisions can you make if you are studying in a class with 90% male engineers? Can you decide about maternity leaves? Can you talk about work-life balance? No, not at all. And therefore, diversity is not just something which is desirable or a box that needs to be checked. It's an imperative. And therefore, what I see today is people who are more open, people who have more diversity so far as their thought process are concerned. One of the things that you said, they are more vocal. The one thing that kind of worries me a little is that one thing that hasn't changed is this constant pressure that they take on themselves to do well in the eyes of their peers and not for themselves. You were talking about something, and I want to take up that thing. That if you see a person who does an IIT, then goes to an IIM, then goes somewhere else, is that a waste of education? No, there's no waste of education, you learn. When Annamalai was asked, why did he go for that shoveling thing? He's an example. So from IIM, Lucknow, that he went somewhere else. And then he decided to go for the police service. Did he not use what he learned at IIM in his police service? He did. I mean, read his book. He talks about all the lessons that he had learned over there. When he discussed politics with me for the first time and said this is what he wanted to do,
so you're the person behind it?
Well, partly, of course. I'm responsible for sending him there, at least partly. He had almost made up his mind. I was just the one to give him the final shove kind of thing. The whole point is he not using what he's learning over there? I personally did last year a course on public policy analysis.
At your own institution?
No, not at my own institution, at some other institution. Now somebody could ask me, what's the point in you learning? The whole point is, since I am now involved with a lot of public policy matters, and very recently one of the committees has taken me up as an economist. I don't know the E of economics. I said I have to educate myself. To stay, not just to stay ahead of the curve, but to make sure that we are being authentic. And for that, learning is important. Every learning is useful. So the challenge, like I was pointing out, was that students are still comparing themselves to their peers. So when you talk about lack of jobs, there are certain sectors, and everyone wants to go to the same sector. They all want to become consultants. They all want to become hedge fund. They all want to become, work with the HUL and PhD. Nothing wrong with that.
But don't you tell them, for instance, the week that they spend in the villages, I mean, there are problems crying out for solutions, right? I mean, we hear so much about startups. I mean, there are 1,000 startups that you can kickstart, looking at the thousands of problems we have in India's villages, for instance.
Kaveri, peer pressure is an unbelievably potent psychological phenomenon. When you start looking at your peers and you think everyone is doing that, you want to get there.
Right.
And which is why we keep talking about it. So we have now many more sessions. We have career counselors also who come and say, hey, look, you seem to be fine-tuned and suited for this particular kind of a job. You can become an entrepreneur. Now we have started something called the entrepreneurship track. We are promoting students. Our students are now working on live projects with bureaucrats. They're working on live projects with political parties, irrespective of which political party, so that they get a flavor of other things. But through this, I also want to talk to all of those 300 students who are sitting out there. Please remember something. If you are living a life which is based on somebody else's expectations out of you, your smile will stay here, it will never reach here. You might get a sense of achievement, but you will never get a sense of fulfillment. So please make sure that you're living a life which is based on your dreams. And I'm so glad, Kaveri, that I see so many women in here. Why? It's going to be doubly difficult for you. Every time you want to do something new, there'll be 20 people who will tell you why it should not be done and why you should not be the one doing it. Of them, 10 will be related to you by blood and 10 by marriage. My suggestion to you is, listen to them.
Ignore all of them.
Listen to them
Okay.
very carefully and then do exactly what you want.
Right. Sorry, the bell's gone off. But Suresh, I want to put a related question to you. We've been talking about students and their learning. Where are the teachers at? Are they as comfortable with change and flexibility, say, as...
It's a great question.
That's a googly.
It's a googly. Yeah. No, I think there has been a way of doing things. We have been used to teaching in a certain way. We have been used to one-way communication, like, classroom-based teaching where you're lecturing to students. This is an attention economy. You are literally fighting for the attention of a student within 2 seconds who is going to be distracted by his or her smartphone.
And smartphones are allowed in your classroom, right?
Yeah, it varies. Some professors may enforce. It's almost impossible to police, right? And so that's a challenge. So the point I'm trying to make is engagement is the new currency, right? If we are able to engage our students interactively, to get them to participate more often, co-create something together with them, they will feel more involved. Now, is that easy to implement in the classroom? Can I get all my faculty to endorse it? Doubtful. It happens. There are quite a few faculty who actually want to do something different. But one thing we have certainly mandated at Great Lakes is at least 30% of our entire experience for the student has to be experiential.
Right.
Himanshu was talking about the rural immersion. We have a program called Karma Yoga, where students spend an entire term in 27 villages around our campus that we have adopted. And we work on a variety of projects like financial literacy, healthcare, variety of topics. And the students are actually, every Sunday they go there, spend time with the villagers, with students or with women. There is a community in these villages called Irulas. They are traditional snake catchers. And the women in these communities are extremely marginalized. They live on the outskirts of the village. So even the main part of the village, they are not allowed to come in, right? And so we have started talking to these women to say that, okay, can we help develop some other skills in you? So we are partnering with, the Rotary clubs to basically do vocational training. We are partnering with small finance banks to help offer them resources that they can start something on their own. And our students are working on business plans for these women so that they can actually get that done, right? So I'm just saying that, these are examples in which,
things that relate to the country that we're living in and the problems it has. Just the last question quickly, because we're out of time. One skill that you'd like your teachers to have? One.
Himanshu, go
To
first.
me?
Yes, always. You first.
Humility.
Nice.
Humility. The fact that we know nothing, the fact that there are multiple ways in which education needs to be imparted and learning needs to happen. The humility to understand this.
And I would say curiosity. That always, I think Himanshu touched upon this, that, you can never know enough. That you always need to stay curious and always need to challenge yourself.
Great. Thank you. I hope we don't come back in 4 years and have the same conversation.
We'll have a different one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.